Here I prepared a gallery wrapped canvas with the Dixie Belle grade primer. I'm trying for a background that is loosely blended, black and white, moody, dark, and moonlit. Watch what happens when I spray my canvas. Oops, not exactly what I wanted. But my paints are mud paint in Just Black, which is a deep charcoal color when it dries. And it's a mineral paint, but it is a clay-based paint. And I'm also using Dixie Belle drop cloth for my white. And that's a chalk paint. And it's going to be very tough to blend these together. Now, I've used the mud paint before, and I do realize it's a little tricky to get that to blend. At least it's difficult to blend it with a chalk paint, because I've done it before. You can see how easily the chalk paint goes on. notice when you spray water mist on the canvas that the only paint that really reacts is. I thought I could maybe tap it on, but this isn't going to work either. I do end up getting what I want, but you'll see it's going to be quite a feat to get there. Sorry, I'm mixing paints here. Trying to add a little bit of water to the mud paint. You'll notice that the chalk paint is just simply going to lay on top of the clay paint. It's not really going to mix together. Normally, if you had two chalk paints, if you use black and white, you'd get various shades of gray. But this isn't really going to happen with this paint. As I rub the brush over it, it more or less just sticks there. For some reason, it reminds me of that painting, The Scream. Oh, oh no. That's just me screaming inside my head. Now, on the other hand, if you're looking for a drippy effect, I think the clay-based paint would be perfect to use. It becomes immediately watery and runny the moment the water hits it. Unlike chalk paint that has a little bit of body to it. The clay paint is thick and sticky. It reminded me of using pitch tar. I didn't want to go out and buy a whole can of black paint, so I just use what I have on hand. I'll mix my own colors and mix paints sometimes if they're like-minded bases. But you win a few and you lose a few. I don't have endless funds and I just need to use what I have. But it's going to work out in the end. So if you're the type of person that would use a bicycle in the Indy 500 to compete, or you would consider cooking a roast, say, over a candle, I would definitely try this. But actually, no, stick with uh, tip, typical bases. Stick with clay-based paints with clay-based paints and chalk paints with chalk paints. Acrylics with acrylics. I do end up putting acrylic over this, but it's going to be a dry surface when I do it, and there won't be any problem. And of course, I'm not blending it. It's starting to look kind of cool. So don't forget, I'm looking for a dark, stormy, moonlit night, possibly some snow squalls. And every time I see myself put the dark black mud paint over, I immediately regret it. There's something about when your hand is actually there, it's not the same as when you're looking back and thinking about it. So I have to highlight the center because I'm going to have the dandelions toward the center. So I want there to be some sort of moonlight coming through in the middle of the print of the painting. Looking at it now, I wish I had made those little squiggles into birds or bats or something. But that would have been fitting. For some reason I couldn't see it from where else. I needed a sling for my arm before I was done because it was getting painful with all the blending. I started spraying my brush rather than the canvas when I had the mud paint on there. That helped a little bit. So you can see that the canvas is dried and has that background of a loose blend that I wanted. It took a long time to get here, but I finally made it. So here with the lines, the curved lines, the mud paint was really beautiful to use. It's a little challenging in that you have to make a little puddle and then kind of thicken your puddle so that it's wet but it's not going to drip. But once you get it to the right consistency, it reacts to the brush really nicely. And here I'm just using a beveled edge flat brush. I don't have expensive brushes. I have some nice brushes for my oils, but I don't use those with any other paint. So, I mean, I just use whatever I can get my hands on. It's kind of like the camera. With a camera, it's great to have a beautiful camera. Um, but if you can't take a good picture with a chintzy camera, having a better one isn't going to do any good. And then it's the same way with your painting tools. You just use what you have. It's a little harder and it could take you a little bit longer, but with some dedication, you'll get there. It's just a process. It can be done without fancy tools. I have a little pot of warm water on the side, and I dip my brushes in it and rinse them off frequently and then blot them on a piece of towel. And I also use the water to get the consistency of the paints to where I want them. And here I'm using a fine tipped brush, but I didn't find that that was much better than the beveled edge. In fact, the beveled edge I think acted a little bit better. What you have to do is you have to put your paint on both sides of the brush and make sure the brush has an evenly distributed paint consistency on both sides and not have any blobs of paint on one side. If you have the beveled edge like that, you can make a nice straight, rather fine line. It depends on how fine your brush is, but you can make it as fine as the brush.
Kind of steam the
With
brush
the
around.
beveled edge, you have to kind of turn your brush so that the depth of the line remains the same from top to bottom. And if this wasn't such a big canvas and I wasn't on camera to do it, I would have just tipped the whole canvas so that my hand wasn't in this crazy position. But for the camera, I just couldn't do it. So a couple of lines I had to go back over because they were squiggly, and the position of my hand was getting a little bit cramped. But it worked. Going from left to right is really easy. Going from right to left, because I'm right-handed, it's very unnatural. So this, you can see how my wrist is tilted. Now you can see how much paint that little thin brush will hold when the mud paint is at the, usable consistency. I can draw several lines without re-dipping my brush into the paint, which is cool. I'm adding small bits of the white drop cloth color to anchor the dandelion fluff on each point on the stem. And you'll see that I can use several different types of paint here, but they're not being blended and it's going to react just fine. So all together, those little bits of dandelion fluff are going to be the light fluff in the chalk paint, and it's a horizontal base, and underneath the fluff will be a white gold acrylic metallic paint, and that's in a horizontal slant as well. And then on top it will be the white pearl metallic paint. That's an acrylic. in a horizontal fashion so that it really brings out the width of each bit of fluff. And then once that dries, I will do small bits in a vertical fashion in the white metallic paint. So all in all, those little bits of fluff will have several layers of paint, and it will add a lot of texture. It's really difficult to see, but in person it has a really nice sparkle to it. And I ended up just putting the painting in one of my bedrooms. So that is the white gold metallic paint. Again, it's hard to see in the camera. I'm sorry about that. You know, for the longest time, I've wanted just a simple graphic painting of straight line dandelions for my room, which is done in different tones of white with some pale gray. And I never see anything that really speaks to me, so I just took one of my old canvases and primed it so that I could use it again. And I really like how it came out. And it was fun, except for the blending. But this part is fun. It would have been more fun if I'd had a chalk paint to do my blends. I'm also going to add some shading to the stems and anchor the nodes and the feet near where the roots would be. I'll do that with the white gold metallic paint. Here I'm going to do some grasses on the bottom, and I'm using the white gold metallic paint. It has just a tiny hint of a champagne kind of gold, very, very pale. It's not a bright gold at all. It's a very pale color and just gives the canvas just a little bit of light. It also adds another nice layer of texture. I'm using a foam brush to put it on. And I'm going to soften it with one of my natural bristle brushes. Note that this is an acrylic paint, but I'm using it on a dry canvas. So I'm having to add some water and making little pools of the mud paint to the right consistency so I can add more lines to the dandelions. So this is the white pearl acrylic paint. I didn't get this on camera, but I used a Q-tip to add some big bits of snow. And here are the vertical lines on each little bit of fluff. And I'm using the beveled edge flat, straight edge brush. I really like that even for fine lines. And like I say, when you're putting paint on it, you want to have it even on both sides. And just enough paint so that you're still having a nice wet thin edge. And you have to dip it in water kind of frequently. But the acrylic paint works okay with it. You have to tilt your hand when you're doing the lines so that they go in different directions. You wouldn't have to do that if you had the beveled tip rat tail brush. But I tried it at one point and it didn't seem to be working any better for me, so I went back to the straight edge. I'm trying hard not to lay my hand over any wet paint. So I don't know if you can notice, but when you use the pointed end brush, you need to kind of twist it into the paint so it maintains a point. I really didn't think that was any easier than using my flat beveled edge. But I thought I'd give it a try. That's a different flat edge. That highlight on the bottom left of the canvas is the sun coming through the window. It's daytime now. I started this in the late afternoon, worked into the evening, and then started again in the next morning. And I finally got a sunny day to work. I was actually glad to start it more or less at night, since it was going to be a nighttime type of scenery. I also added a little bit of glass bead gel to some of the snowflakes to make them sparkle. All of that really gets lost in the recording, though. You don't end up really seeing it or appreciating it like you can in reality. I love the way the grass came out. Now I need some smaller, finer bits of snow. So I grabbed an old working toothbrush and I'm going to dip it in some paint and splatter it on the canvas to make some tiny dots. And that's with the white pearl metallic paint, acrylic paint. I'm going to try to get a little closer in so that you can see the results. Here you get a better view.
Islam emerged in some of the world's hottest and least hospitable places. Its creators were desert people. Its moods were desert moods. And to get a feel for its art, I suggest we consider the desert dweller's
All in
relationship
all, kind
to
of
an
fun.
oasis.
And it came out pretty much close to what I was thinking in the beginning. And I just wanted something really abstract for my room. Leave me a comment, give me some advice on the clay paints versus chalk paints.